Hey guys, I'm going to do something more fun and lighthearted today. Since Halloween is near, I'm going to share with you 5 really goofy and cheesy B-movie horror classics that tend to get overlooked. Every horror fan knows about the all-time great ones like Halloween, Psycho, The Shining, and so on. Well, these 5 films are not in that category, but still fun and entertaining. So if you like your horror a little more on the funny and cheesy side, check out these cult classics. You can thank me later.
And here we go.
For the first movie today, we are going all the way back to 1946. The Beast with 5 Fingers is an underrated horror classic of the 40s done on a low B-movie budget. This film is as much of a psychological mystery as it is an old-school horror flick. So the story takes place in an old mansion in Italy. Peter Lorre stars as astrologist Hilary Cummings, who works as an assistant to a paralyzed piano player Francis. Andrea King plays Julie, a live-in nurse who cares for Francis, who can only play the piano with his good left hand. After a get-together with friends to witness his will, Francis dies in an accident, setting off strange events and murders that are linked to Francis's disembodied left hand.
I saw it with my own eyes.
There have been many killer hand movies over the years, but this one was the first and still probably the best. The reason why is Peter Lorre. He is the backbone of this film and elevates it to a different level. If you like watching someone go through a living nightmare and descend into madness, then Lorre's performance is for you. His eyes, his voice, and his mannerisms lift this movie out of the dumpster of B-movies and make it respectable.
Don't you hear it? It's blasting my eardrums. I can't stand it.
The first hour is slow moving and the ending isn't great, but the hand special effects are pretty good for the era, even though it looks cheesy in some scenes. However, in one scene, you can see the string pulling the hand along. It's good for a chuckle. And the scene with the hand playing the piano is creepy as hell.
Hilary, listen! Can you hear it? The piano. It's the hand playing. It's the hand. You were right all the time. It was Ingram's hand that committed murder.
Also, I guess it's an unwritten rule in horror movies that when someone has a will redone, you know who will die soon. But Peter Lorre's incredible performance is worth a watch. He deserves a hand. Fast forward to 1958, a time when sci-fi horror monster movies were big. A tiny B-movie flick made for $110,000 called The Blob burst on the scene and unpredictably took the country by storm, grossing over $4 million, almost $37 million in today's money. The Blob stars the future King of Cool, Steve McQueen, in his first starring role, earning him a whopping $3,000. It's kind of funny that he was 27 at the time, playing a teenager. It's definitely corny and cheesy, but satisfying with a certain charm. However, it's more comical than scary. The Blob's plot revolves around Steve McQueen and his girlfriend trying to save their town from an alien blob of jello that swallows everything it touches. But the cops and the local citizens refuse to believe them, so Steve and his girlfriend round up their teen friends to save the day. What made this movie really popular was the main characters being teenagers who wound up being the heroes. The typical 1950s sci-fi horror style of the movie is comical with the stereotypical adult characters, excessive dialogue, and teenage hijinks. The special effects are decent for a $100,000 budget. Some parts of the movie make no sense, like when Steve suddenly forgets all about the deadly blob to go drag racing. With a film full of unknown actors, the amount of overacting is expected but adds to the fun and cheesiness of the film. One of my favorite lines from the film is when a nurse says, "Nothing can stop it." Extra cheese, please.
Doctor, nothing will stop it.
Jumping to 1965, this next movie is naughty, sexy, and violent as well as being bizarre. Faster Pussycat, Kill, Kill was made by soft porn director Russ Meyer. This wild film is a mystery/horror, a hot rod thriller, and an exploitation film all rolled into one. It's considered a cult classic.
You're wasting yourself on this kid and hanging us up for nothing. For nothing? It's got nothing to do with the money. She is the money.
The story is about three sadistic go-go dancers, Varla, Rosie, and Billy, that leave the nightclub and go out to the desert of California to begin a kidnapping and murder rampage. The opening line gives you an idea of what you are in for.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to violence.
Faster Pussycat doesn't have much of a plot but has loads of attitude, along with a good dose of humor and satire. There's not much acting either. Most of the dialogue is screamed at you.
So who do I get to take care of? The muscle man? You got two of everything, and some left over.
All three women are well endowed, and there's lots of camera angles that show off major TNA. Plus, they like to take lots of baths. During the racing scenes, you'll notice the women sitting in a motionless car and turning the steering wheel back and forth frantically as they are driving in a straight line. After watching this movie, you can see where Tarantino got a lot of his inspiration from.
Breast or thigh, darling?
Why don't you take one of each, son? They both look tender. He's got a big motor to feed.
Say whatever you want about Faster Pussycat Kill Kill, it's still silly and ridiculous fun. The second film, directed by horror master Wes Craven and released in 1977, The Hills Have Eyes, was one of the scariest horror movies of the time. It has all the elements of a classic horror flick: creepy, gross, thrilling, and dreadful. Filmed in the Mojave Desert, Craven's classic was loosely drawn from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 years earlier. It's about a middle-class American family going to California that accidentally passes through an Air Force testing range closed to the public. They crash and are stranded in the desert. The family discovers they're being stalked by a family of cannibalistic mutants living in the mountains. It's basically a road trip gone wrong, similar to such movies as Joyride and Rest Stop. The Hills is more bleak and takes itself more seriously than the other films on my list, but the villainous mutant family can seem cartoony in some parts. Being a low-budget 70s horror film, the visuals and lighting hasn't held up well, adding a little to the cheese factor. Craven added a touch of dark comedy that adds to the fun. That being said, the story itself has held up well and has been copied many times.
I like it. Maybe dog's too good for a runaway slut like you.
What's really interesting is to watch how the victims turn the tables and fight back, and how funny it is to see the villains cope with it. A great classic horror movie leaves a lasting impression. Kudos to Wes Craven, job well done. Enough said. The last movie today for your Halloween viewing pleasure is from 1985. Re-Animator is an offbeat, gory horror film with its own style, making it a guilty pleasure horror classic. Loosely based on an H.P. Lovecraft story, Herbert West is a Swiss scientist who has discovered a way to bring dead tissue back to life. West, along with a fellow student and his fiancée, continues his research at the local university, eventually moving on to the local hospital morgue with obvious disastrous results.
Herbert West has effected reanimation in dead animal tissue.
Stuart Gordon's effort at making a good movie about mad doctors and dead bodies isn't campy, but instead has deadpan humor, no pun intended, and is extremely bloody. Gordon doesn't push the envelope, he shows you there is no envelope.
Mr. West.
You'll never get credit for my discovery. Who's going to believe a talking head get a job in a sideshow?
Just to give you an idea of the tone of the film, all you have to do is look at the tagline. Herbert West has a good head on his shoulders and another on his desk. Re-Animator has a high nostalgic cheese factor with lots of cringe moments. It's a cool little B-movie horror comedy that has become a cult classic. Check it out if you like black humor. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you enjoyed the video, click the like button. Also, if you've subscribed, click the little bell icon for notifications. Share your comments below. And happy Halloween!